Welcome, everyone, to the BlueDrop podcast, where we talk about the Bluefly collective perspective on Drupal and our community.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode, where we are discussing why many Bluefly members are M-shaped.
I'm Chad Hester, a co-host with Rose Cameron. I'm an enterprise technical consultant and solutions architect with a 25-year background in web strategy, design, user experience, and development. I've been working heavily with Drupal and this community for over 16 years.
And I'm Rose Cameron, global brand strategist and cultural anthropologist with over 30 years of experience working in high tech. I've launched little-known languages such as C, C++, Visual Basic, Linux, Rational Rose, Java, and Azure. Friend and confidant to the developer community. So joining us today on this episode is a very special friend, Johan Drolshagen. He's the Chief Technology Officer, and he can be found at bluefly.io as well as Nexus 3. Best ways to connect with him are Johan, Johann Drolshagen, Drolshagen at bluefly.io.
Well, now I know where everybody's getting my email.
That's how we sign you up for every marketing list.
There you go.
So I think this topic came about because so many folks at Bluefly are what we refer to as M-shaped, and we kind of want to review that a little bit. But really, let's lead in. What does it actually mean to be M-shaped? So just to flip it over to you, Johan, what does it mean to you? You're our guest, and I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are about it.
Sure. When I talk about being M-shaped, I'm talking about basically rabbit holes, finding ways where you can go deeper into a particular topic that gets you so deep that you almost reach a level of expertise until you sort of snap out of it and remember you were only there to work on this project or develop something that assists for that market segment. I've done this a number of times in life, and it's actually been incredibly rewarding, and it actually changes the way I look for projects and the projects that I choose to work on. Give you an example, just in a true disparity of my M shape. I learned to fly airplanes before I ever graduated high school. I currently live aboard a sailing vessel that I converted to 100% electric. In a previous career, I was a sommelier dealing with wines, and that even went into point of sale systems and reservation systems for hotels and restaurants, and eventually material management systems. And then, somewhat by accident, I was actually admitted to the Washington State Bar Association, and I've maintained a niche of working a lot of legal and judicial type of projects, which has actually become a bit of a calling card for me. So these things seem like they're not related, but they're actually very closely related. Learning to fly, I learned to add a dimension. In learning wine, we always worked with a bin system, which was the very early adoption of a non-linear storage, database storage, so that we could know things by their placement as opposed to having things alphabetized from A to B. Getting into the legal realm, everything was a linear process, but there are a lot of offshoots, and I like to consider it more of a quantum approach, because some things have to happen simultaneously and in the background, as it were. And it definitely has a huge impact upon the final product that you're going to release, to make sure that you know those and know how they interact and interrelate. And that's actually part of the thing that brought me to Drupal, is the ability to have so many functions going on at the same time while maintaining a very simplified user experience. And because of that, I can go deep into any project that I actually choose to, and then tend to come out with an innovative result that hopefully is future proof.
But I think what we're hearing here is you take a little sprinkle of interest in lots of different areas, which a well-rounded human tends to have, and then add a little dash of time, not the herb. And you end up finding a lot of depth in a lot of very seemingly unrelated areas. But that's life is we have a lot of these different branches that we explore, whether it's career related or personal interests, hobbies, and they just bloom quite a bit. And sometimes hobbies become careers. And so just to jump back to definition a little bit, we have a couple notes on this. So to be M-shaped, so true polymaths with a deep knowledge in at least three non-adjacent areas of expertise. So you listed a few really strong examples of non-adjacent areas. Um, and also, folks will develop the ability to integrate concepts across systems and disciplines. So things that are seemingly unrelated, you might take a legal background and cross that with a technical background and have a very firm leadership position, executive or just navigating contracts or trying to even uh, participate in the sales process. So inherently, there's an ability to work with greater flexibility on cross-functional teams. And we want to talk about what these other shapes are, but really just to hang on this, what is M-shaped and whatnot, a little bit more. A lot of times you'll see there's this saying that a lot of people use, and they only miss like half of the saying. It's the jack of all trades and master of none. The rest of it is still better than a master of one. So it seems to demote it, but actually a full quote is you're actually promoting the idea that somebody um, can actually have a great breadth. But M-shaped text takes that a little bit deeper in several areas where you have actually found mastery in a number of different areas. And I think that what that does is it makes you a unique type of problem solver where if I were an auto mechanic and that's really all I've ever been able to do, I'm really freaking good at fixing mechanical issues. But as soon as I encounter like legal issues, I I have to hire a professional to be able to do that. Now, even if I'm not a lawyer and I did have some sort of legal understanding, I can understand the language, I can navigate that space and perhaps have a auto mechanic business. So you start to expand your capabilities of what it is that you can do in life.
Absolutely. And I think about the other shapes, as it were, and it's one of the things that Johann brought up was as his life has evolved and as his experience has evolved, there always seems with you, Johann, to be that hunger, that kid at the side of the road poking the dead animal and going, wonder how it died, where it died, what ran into it, all of that. But then there's this fascination to do that across a variety of different topic areas, right? Where that inquisitiveness, that curiosity drives so much of your development, and you're pretty tenacious as a friend. I know that about you. You just go for it and go and go and go and go. And one of the things that interests me about the other shapes are, if you look at them, I think that people can evolve to M-shaped. It's not like this thing, oh, he was born M-shaped. No, you know what I mean, Chad? Maybe that curiosity is core, but say for the hyphen shaped, as they call them, that's kind of more of your young person who's getting a general knowledge of things. Maybe they're at university and they're studying a variety of topics, so they've got a base layer of knowledge, but no deep expertise, no perspective, right? those I-shaped people, which a lot of us know, I kind of consider them passionate in one area, right? Like cars. You meet a lot of these guys who are like, they love their cars and they figure out ways to, take them apart and put them back together again and race them and all of that. But, it's the car, darn it, or baseball fans, specific fans who can like quote you numbers. I live here in State College. And trust me, I know football fans, right? They are deep eye types, Um, and then you've got the T's that maybe have a little bit of that general knowledge plus maybe one deep area of expertise, right? I think what's unusual about the M's is that they do go down these multiple routes. They have kind of that elasticity to be polymaths, but they also have an ability to collaborate. And I've just noticed because they have that knowledge, they have the generalized knowledge, they can understand where other people are coming from. They're maybe a little bit more empathetic, or they can recognize, the expertise in others. They've tried maybe to go deep in some of those areas and have realized, wait, that's not my strong suit. So they can really appreciate people that do well in those areas. And so, they have that kind of superpower of collaboration and a really, I would argue, a deep respect of others who have areas of expertise. That those are the M-shaped kind of qualities. And, as you and I were talking, Chad, when I did all these interviews with people with Bluefly, I kept going, oh my gosh, there's so many M-shaped people in this group. Why? Why? Like yourself, Chad, how are you M-shaped?
So uh, I think just kind of lead into that as well. One of the things that I found about being M-shaped, you're right. You start off with maybe one depth, but then you add others over time because your interest as a human being kind of expanded. Sometimes you just naturally encounter things. Like I didn't expect to work with nonprofits, for example, in my career. But yeah, I mean, when you're working with agencies, you encounter the projects that you encounter, and then you just get familiar with it. But one of the qualities that I really like about M-shaped is, say, for example, I'm a Drupal developer. And that's my passion. If I were just I-shaped or even T-shaped, maybe I'm really strong at Drupal development. But if I need to talk to a client stakeholder or a designer or somebody that isn't so much in my lane, so to speak, I'm going to have more challenges communicating their languages. I'm going to not necessarily empathize as readily. I won't know what questions to ask to be more effective at my job if I were just a Drupal developer. So I think the quality of being M-shaped, and I'm not saying everyone should strive to be this. Be who you are. Be what feels like it comes naturally. These are the things that just take time. So all of us on this episode are, well, admittedly, a little bit older. So we developed this experience. But um, the one thing, and I use this term a lot. If it offends anybody, my apologies, but I use it because I feel it's playful. Is I consider myself neurospicy. Neurotypical is a word that we refer to folks who are just um, the normal cognitive function on a baseline psychological profile. People who are autistic on the spectrum, people who have ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia. These are folks who are traditionally referred to as not neurotypical. And we have challenges that we face. So common challenges for ADHD include things like executive function issues, which is, I love the analogy of it's sort of like working with less RAM. So my working memory is a little bit lower, but there's also symptoms like dopamine deficiency, which is why you see prescriptions for things like Adderall. It's not to make you work harder or make you pay attention to the things because you're hyper or you're amped up. It's because these are the things that are compensating for dopamine deficiencies. And without getting into the medical side of things, because I'm not a doctor, disclaimer, I've spent a good bit of my life trying to understand my own ADHD, my own autism, and I didn't even know I was autistic until like 5 years ago. I tested and got diagnosed for ADHD when I was a child. It was like the late 80s. So I've known that for a long time, but took fast forward a little bit. But I think that also touches into the factors of motivation. And a lot of people don't necessarily know what it takes to become motivated. So the neurotypical folks, a lot of this may come naturally either through will, but you cannot will yourself to be motivated if you just don't have it. And the big factors, I literally have a post-it in front of my computer wherever I am, just as reminders to say, here's the tools that you have at your disposal to become motivated. So it's not just
Mm.
about pharmaceutical therapies. It's also about cognitive behavioral therapies and things that you can use. So this taps into being M-shaped. If you make something urgent, that helps motivate you. You got a critical deadline. We've all been there, like study for the exam, crunch time sort of thing. But if you procrastinate, it's because that urgency didn't exist until it was there. But you can break up tasks. So that's another factor, making something easy. So if you've got a monster task, it can be very debilitating for someone exactly like myself who has executive function issues. I look at a huge task, and unless I break it down, it feels unachievable. So that's one of the other things. Making something imperfect. Sometimes I feel so much pride and ego about a result. Maybe I'm making a Drupal module, or maybe I'm writing a sales proposal. But if I think about what perfect is, it can be paralyzing. So instead, I ask myself, what's good enough? What's effective? And that brings it back down to earth. Making something interesting. You know, if I look at something and it just seems boring or unappealing, then that's not going to motivate me to do something. But when I can find that kernel of interest, that helps, which is highly related to the last of the five factors, which is novelty or newness. Like when I moved here to British Columbia, I'd never kayaked before, but our neighbor took us kayaking, and oh God, it was new. I wanted to learn every part of it. I instantly went out and got certified to do sea kayaking. And that's an example of becoming M-shaped is you have a general interest in something, you encounter something. After you encounter something, you develop a knowledge of that thing. After you develop a knowledge, which is just absorbing other people's experience and, pros, cons, do's, don'ts, then you become experienced. You start to have a visceral understanding of what's going on and you make it your own. And then you can share that knowledge with other people through mentorship, leadership, education pathways. And that's the pathway to mastery. Mastery is that deep depth of any M-shaped person that knows, hey, Jesus, Chad didn't know how to do sea kayaking a few years ago, but here he is. I still don't know how to roll, but when I get to that point, I know that I've about mastered this thing. But eons ago, another way that I'm M-shaped, I love beer. I try to, alcohol in moderation, all those disclaimers. But I didn't like liquor for the longest time. But eventually somebody turned me on and said, Chad, you just got to try whiskey. It's such a incredible experience. It's not about getting intoxicated. It's about slowly sipping and understanding how something feels and sometimes how it pairs with other foods and where you are in a meal process. So it expanded from whiskey to other spirits. So I love mezcal, especially the nice smoky
Oh,
ones.
same.
And after that, I started to learn how to make cocktails because if you have a big bar and you just want to burn through a bottle of a spirit, no better way than to dilute it with complementary ingredients that can really elevate something to my wife. She cooks. I've only recently started cooking a bit more. But again, this is that M shape. I started to get good enough and comfortable enough making cocktails that now I bartend on the side just for fun. It's not to really make a killing of money. Admittedly, here in Canada, minimum wage is like $18 and some change, and you get tips on top of that. In the US, it's deplorable some places where it's like $2 and some change. It's not a livable wage to work like that. That's again, if you're minimum wage. So that's also what made it approachable to me to try it out professionally because you have premixes and all that. So these are just examples. I haven't even mentioned anything technical. I got my start in what it is that I'm doing early on in my life. Like half of my family worked for NASA. I lived in Virginia for the beginning part of my life, and as I'm going through and just seeing what do I like, when I was, it was funny. I was at a business meetup, and one of the questions that we're, using as icebreakers was, "What did you want to be when you were 7?" Like way back, because you can learn a lot. Some people say, lawyer, policeman, fireman, stuff like that, doctor. I said I wanted to be an inventor
Huh.
because it was stimulating to me at that time, and I didn't know I had ADHD, but I knew that I loved creating stuff. And fast forward to my interest in engineering, my brother, he wanted to become an architect. That's fine. He's not an architect, but he studied for that, and I wanted to do mechanical engineering because I knew every mechanical system would need parts for things, and mechanical systems are complicated, and I felt like that would be a nice pathway to being an inventor or creator of some sort. I did paper drafting, then eventually I got into AutoCAD and 3D Studio, but that exposed me. Again, growing up around government, you experienced the internet before it was the internet. It was ARPANET, it was bulletin
Yep.
boards, dial up, things like that. So exposure to computer systems was like as soon as I could touch a keyboard. I remember punch cards, like boxes of punch cards that would have to be in order. And my name's Chad. I know what a hanging Chad is, but I didn't know the name way back then, but now I
Yeah.
do.
Well,
So
it's funny you say that, Chad, because my mom worked with Howard Hughes on some of the first mainframes, right?
yeah, big reel to
And
reels as well. Yeah,
yeah, and she'd walk into a room and what now fits underneath
fascinating.
my desk, and the entire room
Yeah.
was, servers, just whizzing away madly. So, um, Johan, when you talk about or you think about your motivators to mastery, what motivates you?
Well, I think it's what we've already talked about. I mean, once you get, I don't know if the proper word is diagnosis, but once you get the label of M shaped,
Yeah.
you do learn these tools to manage your own attention and your own focus. But once you've mastered those tools, those tasks, you can actually look at any project and just chop it right up. Like you can say, this is going to need to be over here, this will be over there. One thing triggers another thing. We know what the outcome has to be, and you just naturally hear what someone will typically describe as this monumental feat, but you're seeing it as a multitude of tasks that are connected. And in some cases, I can literally choose to walk away from a project because I know that the person hasn't put into the project what's needed to accomplish it, or I can see everything that's in it, even though they're only looking to extract a particular piece of information. And I can say there's an entire array of information or entire array of outcomes that can be provided. And those are additionally helpful or beneficial or a net positive. So the sort of the way Chad recommended to break things down so that you can absorb them, that is the nature of project management. That is the nature in many ways of technology and of the application of different technologies. And the way that that helped me in the legal realm was you had a lot of players, they had their own linear processes to go through, but it all had to come together in a single environment where they could all make those things happen. but the outcome was dependent on each of them doing their part in order to deliver a particular outcome. And none of them, and I love to point out, law enforcement, attorneys, and judges, none of them are really concerned about what the other's doing. They're in their own lane.
Yeah.
And when you start working on case management systems or evidence handling systems or something along those lines, you need to know what all of those lanes are. And it's really second nature when you already have this diagnosis of going down rabbit holes. You can call each one a rabbit hole, you figure it out, you come back out, you put all the pieces together, and you've got a winning pattern.
And I I find that you're hitting the nail on the head. I find that breadth and depth, the ability to
Mhm.
flip back and forth between the two. You can see big picture and have a conversation, high level planning. One of my favorite roles is being a product owner, and
Mhm.
you have to have that ability to switch back and forth. So if I'm doing a discovery where we're just focused on what is the admissions process for your university, and I'm talking specifically to the admission department about some of their landing pages, things like that. But then you can flip back up to the kind of big picture and say, okay, what is this very specific thing that we can iterate and iterate and iterate and make this bloom in budget? How does that fit into the puzzle of the overall budget? What do we need to accomplish? What's the list of objectives that we have this cycle, this release, this project? I don't think a lot of people have that comfort level in switching back and forth between
Yeah.
being very broad and seeing big picture, as well as being able to have hyper specific conversations. Like you can hear it in all of our voices. We could talk about any one of these given subjects for hours on end and probably bore the tears out of our audience. But
So
but
true.
I think jumping back high level, I think it's important for us to understand when we are potentially boring our audience, so that way we can be active participants in understanding our social connection or what it is that we're responsible for delivering.
You say that, and are we all military brats?
Uh,
All three of
a little
us.
bit. I guess NASA is military
Yeah,
adjacent,
yeah,
but yeah.
military adjacent, because they did this big study about who are the most resilient people in the world, right? And what they found was that it's the children of these people in the military who have constantly traveled around. And it's because those kids have to drop into new environments and figure out a role for themselves that's meaningful and do that, right? If they want to survive with any friends or the rest of it. And I look back on my childhood, very much a global citizen, travel, I circumnavigated the world, I don't know how many times now. And a lot of that was me, being pulled out of environments where I had become comfortable and dropped into completely new environments with new languages, new people, new composition, new power structures, not a lot of commonality. And you have to figure out a way to connect and be valuable. Right. So that's kind of that mix of the generalization as well as those depths. Okay, quickly analyze this environment and then figure out a role that's meaningful that you can then drill into.
It's the combination. I think this is the age old statement, but it's the combination of nature and nurture. And
Yeah.
sometimes nurture isn't just a matter of what external factors are doing. You can self nurture too. But what I'm hearing from you, Rose, is that this is your pathway to being M shaped. So what does your M shape look like?
My M shape is so mental. I mean, I got my first job in the theater when I was 11 years old, right? So I have had and still have a 3 octave range with my voice. And that was discovered and so I worked from a very young age. I was pulled out of school. First I was sent to boarding school, then I was pulled out of school. I worked professionally in the theater. My voice, dancing, all the rest of it became that, whole package, as they like to call it. So I did that. And then I went back to Britain, and it was like, wait a minute, if you're going to work in the theater, I had US citizenship because of my military family, right? Uh, if you're going to stay in this country that you love and you so closely associate with, then you've got to find a job that doesn't require you to build relationships, like the theater does. You've got to find something fast. So I was like, okay, well, what do I do? What do I do well? I kind of communicate well, kind of, sort of. So I was like, what does that? And Ogilvy and Mather advertising, right? So I went into advertising as account service person. Previous to that, I had in the theater a lot of gay friends. Like, my entire universe, I was surrounded by gay men. And then this crazy thing called HIV hit the world, right? So I became a teacher, teaching people how to have safe sex and how to put condoms on with your mouth. I'm a very talented woman. Okay. Uh, I actually had an instance with a prostitute in Glasgow who said, so how long have you been in the game? And I said, "Oh, I said I'm not in the game." I said, "I'll do it for a steak supper." Uh, to which she howled with laughter, right? But so theater, advertising, teaching, and then coming back to do the cultural anthropology that I was kind of, I believe, born to do, which is really understanding different cultures and recognizing massive patterns, right? So, and I really think that's something you can only do after you've seen things time after time after time. So, people say, what's your superpower? And I'm like, perspective. I can look at a situation like Mrs. Marple, and go, oh, so and so reminds me of this, that, and the other thing. So therefore, right? But it also, I think, one of the things that I've learned through all of this is the critical importance of others to your survival, and that you can never assume that something will stay the same.
Oh, for sure. It's like the force functions that exist in our life. You had several force functions there that nudged you in the direction. We can all reject a force function. I mean, it's possible, but sometimes when you recognize an opportunity or a necessity, you kind of lean into it. And I think another common trait, I'm not going to speak for everyone in this statement, but your identity is not bound to your interests. Like you aren't just your interests.
No.
You're more an expression of your actions over the course of time. And all of us have the ability to change. Like just because someone knew you 20 years ago does not mean that they know you now. Like we evolve, we can improve, we can certainly regress. But I think it's important to say that just because you're interested in something doesn't mean that like baseball or football. That's not who you are. It's just simply what you're interested in. And you're not the embodiment of a single interest. So I think that idea of we can easily get bored or we just have to, out of necessity, find other things to do. Right now, the technology industry is undergoing a massive wave of layoffs,
Yeah.
defundings, and there's a tremendous number of people who have to, out of necessity, find other things to make money and enjoy if they can.
I'd
Well,
even go a little bit farther than that. It's you need an element of this in basically every team. And one of the things, like I had a buddy that he without all the polite diagnosis, he said I was chaos neutral. which meant if I walked into a team that was nice and organized, I would go in and I would insert the chaos, and all the people that depended on everything being calm and orderly would lose their mind because I was not under the same assumptions of what should happen, when it should happen, why it should happen, that they'd already settled. But because of that, you can come up with a considerably more efficient way of doing things. And the flip side of that is that if everything's in chaos, a person like us will walk in and calm the entire situation in about a heartbeat, because we can, again, take all the pieces, recognize all the perspectives, organize it in such a way that everybody's actually getting what they need in order to get the job done. And I actually think, yeah, I spent a lot of my time in the hospitality industry and working at some of the best restaurants and hotels in the world. And the way you described bartending was, you've got to have that mentality going on behind the bar the same way you've got to have it going on behind the line, as well as you've got to have it at the maitre d's desk and the organization of the tables and the service. You've got to make all those moving pieces work together. So it's a very predictable crucible for people of our mindset to work in those environments that are pure chaos in order to make them run. And I don't say make as in force. I mean, it's literally more a matter of coordination than it is force, to give you the outcome, which is a successful experience or event or service for many people. And you will be exhausted at the end of it. You'll be mentally exhausted as well as physically exhausted. And so yeah, that chaos neutral is definitely an element that I bring to any environment.
And I think when you're talking about chaos, there are a certain breed of people who thrive in chaos without panicking. And there's obviously a range, like an ER nurse is going to have, or a search and rescue person is going to have a very
100%.
different cut from a different cloth sort of thing. But there's a common element that we're seeing a lot of times is part of the reason why you're not panicking is you have the muscle memory. You understand what's going on in a lot of
Yep.
different contexts. You're not paralyzed by fear of something that you don't know, or the ability to communicate with people who can help you know what to do in a moment. You're able to slow down. It's that flow state that a lot of people enter when they're capable and in that driver's seat, so to speak, and coordinating with other people.
There's a wonderful quadrant that they've it's interesting. Primarily female researchers have done the work on what drives, passion. And you talk about the flow state, which is a wonderful professor from the University of Chicago, who I can never pronounce his name. It's this wonderful, mad, long, chamulla name. And he talks about effort and momentum, right? And that when you combine the two, that's when you enter that state of flow. Um, and there's a woman that works purely in psychological safety, and she talks about the opportunity to combine that incredible interest and a sense of psychological safety, right? So that it's meaningful, plus you have permission to go there, right? And I think that when we as people have those extreme states of working, right, where it's kind of like the Apollo mission, they're floating in space, how do we get them back down, that you have the ability to focus in and know that you can trust these people around you to help you pull something out of the mire. And that if you go hysterical, it's not going to help anyone. It
Hmm.
really is just drama for drama's sake at the end of the day. And I have been known to pull people out of rooms and go, why don't you have a nice coffee or a walk? you know, for a wee while. And can you deal with this problem for me while you're walking?
Yeah.
Because they can set off this kind of electric energy with others that is not productive. So you have to literally disconnect it and then have them plug into themselves, go away, deal with that, come back, bring it back to us. And then they'll be able to be productive again.
Oh, for sure. And I think you're touching on another wonderful aspect of this, which is, in football, I'm a professional football fan. Uh, they say that you win the game in practice, not on the field,
Yes.
and that's a lot of times because you're just running play after play after play, and when you actually do it on the field, it's because even if you failed in practice, you've done it so many times, you kind of understand the mechanics of how to handle it, and that I believe is actually an essential part of gaining experience in any discipline. But I think there's an extra element there. You touched on the Apollo mission. I think this is really important. You can't practice everything.
No.
And having a background knowledge of just the individual parts, your toolkit, so to speak, because you have such a breadth and depth in your toolkit, it means that those unknown moments, like let's say you're an auto mechanic and something breaks that's completely unexpected in the car, do you just panic and say, "Well, I've never practiced this, so I hope I can find someone else that knows what to do with this"? No, you have to figure it out at that point. Sometimes it's again like in the Apollo mission where they have to make clean air out of the things that they physically have up there, and sometimes that's a matter of really going off script. And I think we've all been in that moment where we've gone off script, in these podcast episodes, for example, where we go off script and we're comfortable doing it because we understand the overarching goal of what we're trying to do. We have support in the people around us, and we just know how to move with the ball, so to speak. I am mincing the hell out of all of these metaphors, but I,
You
I
go,
think
son, you go. It's this whole thing is so interesting because I think that there's another element in here, which is comfort with failure.
100%.
Because I've learned more through failure and through something not working. And that's what has allowed me to move out of one deep line and into others,
Yep.
right? In the M-shaped world, people who can't deal with failures stay in that eye,
Yeah.
right? I'm an expert and I'm going to protect this expertise for as long as I live. And anybody who fights my expertise, I will go to the wall.
Yeah,
So,
there's a practice that I uh, lovingly refer to as ego-driven design, which is,
oh,
tongue in cheek. People have where when you're so overly controlling about something, it's rooted in deep insecurities. It's
mm,
where you're now getting out of your lane because you just don't have that experience, and you're not allowing other people to participate in the process. But to your point, Rose, failing early is a necessity. Knowing that anyone who says failure is not an option has clearly rejected the notion and suffered along the way. But failing early allows you to learn early. It allows you to understand, like, if I think of everything as a test instead, if I say maybe instead of going for remember, like, make it imperfect, instead of going for the like final result from day one, say let's just do small tests. Let's see if this one assumption. Let's take some responsibility. So let's see if this one assumption that I think is actually right, and just really break them down. What if I'm wrong? What is the cost of being wrong? And sometimes, if you're so deeply invested in being right, that cost just skyrockets
yeah.
and you're taking everybody else down with you. So I think all of us have learned not to panic in those moments because we're okay to fail. We recognize that it's an essential part of learning how to succeed.
Yeah.
It's
It's got to be
mature.
part of every process. It's fail early, fail often. It's additional data points. It lets you feel your way through the darkness of what you haven't done by knowing where the walls are, where the ceiling is, where the
Yeah.
floor is. It's absolutely part of it. I don't know how to necessarily quantify that for clients, because
Yeah.
clients, at least in this day and age, the we get a lot of clients that are not technically inclined, so they're only focused on the outcome,
Mm.
on the desired outcome, no less, and their own bias gets deeply, deeply in their way.
Yes.
And I don't really mind it, because I know at the end they're asking for 100%. I'm probably going to respond by telling them it's 110% is what they're going to get. And
Yeah.
the reality is I'll deliver them 150%, and the other 50% past the 100, they probably didn't even know was there. They didn't even know it was possible. They didn't know it was capable. But that's the piece that breaks them into the next generation. And part of the reason I love focusing on the justice industry, the courts and that kind of thing, the courts start out 10 to 15 years behind in technology.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
everything, literally everything has to be a moonshot, to stay with the NASA reference. Um, it's got to level them up. It's got to get them past where they actually need to be, and it's got to get them prepared to go into the future. And to bring it back to Drupal, that's what Drupal does for me. That's how
Mm.
Drupal empowers me. And I don't want to, Chad, you mentioned a point, and Rose, you hit it too, that I don't want to I don't want to downplay. I want to call it out. If you wind up as part of a team that can facilitate that can understand that, oh, that was going to fail, or put it this way, we're going to try three approaches and at least two of them are going to fail, if not all three, right? But they're gonna let us know what we can do past that point and which direction we go. If you've got a team that can work with that disposition, like that's a dangerous group of people in
Yeah.
a very
Yeah.
positive way, or a very negative way. Hence why I apply chaos neutral to myself. But I mean, they're going to be a very capable group of individuals that can change paradigms permanently, in many ways, years before the market itself changes. So,
And you, and
yeah.
Johan, you're talking about it's hard to understand how to approach clients about
Hmm.
that idea, especially people who are answering to someone above them that just wants that
Yes.
objective. A lot of things start tied to it. The way that I've found to navigate that personally, and it's not a one size fits all, so definitely not to be taken that way. But of course, some people who are receptive, we can talk about like lean startup and lean UX, the Toyota lean process and all that. But if people aren't receptive to that mentality or to that education, sometimes I boil it down to, instead of telling people the consequences, I ask them, because I'd rather they say it to themselves out loud. Let's list out a few assumptions that we've identified. You may take your assumption as fact, but unless we have verifiable evidence that that assumption is actually true, which can change, as we know in the technology world, over time,
Hmm.
one solution may pass and then over time may fail. But what is the cost? What is the consequence of that being wrong? What will
Yeah.
failure cost us if we aren't going to bother to explore that right now? Sometimes we can recognize that it's minimal and we move on. It's the good enough principle. But if that cost is really high, it's like, will you lose your job? Will your company fail if you're wrong? Let's get that out of the way right now.
And where does
Um,
it fit into the hierarchy of needs? Yeah.
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 Um, so again, I'm going to just beat up the courts with this, and attorneys. The the way it happens, the way the rubber meets the road, is two things. One, it becomes tech debt, like it's creating tech debt, and two, it starts to get into a logical fallacy of incremental improvement. And when you've got a system that's already 10 to 15 years behind, especially if they're claiming to some level of authority, um, you're going to see that inaccuracy come out in every single thing that's done in that system. And there was a great book out, and I apologize, I'm not going to remember the author's name, but it was The American Civil War by Other Means. And it's a big portion of what we're going through with our government, with technology. We're still teenagers in the information age, right? So
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
we're not doing the things we can. And some of us are working on things that the general public isn't even going to be aware of for another 10 years. And it's not because I mean, some of them are top secret, but it's not because it's top secret. It's because it's just going to take that long for it to be an adoption across the board, where the average individual, and I hate the word average, especially when it's paired up with individual, but I mean, a what was the word you used? Neurotypical person who's just going on about their business and life and whatever else isn't going to need to be aware of these advances. But the systems that are failing under their own bureaucratic bloat need these incredibly badly. Now, that sounds like a heartless statement because people are going to lose jobs and AI is already doing that. And I get all of that. Uh, if you narrow your vision down to having a system that works and it works at scale and it gives everybody in the system what they're looking to get out of it, you've got an efficiency that is truly essential that has as of yet been ignored. And that's usually what I find, especially when dealing with government work, is they get to about 90% of where they should be, and then they feel like it's such an advancement that they hang on to it with white knuckles.
Yeah.
And that is not what we build. That is not how anybody should be building. Iterative improvements are garbage. That's a marketing thing. Like each year the car's got to have a new model year. That's nonsense. And fortunately, in the medium that we work in, what generally technology, but obviously we're a group of Drupalers. Drupal is constantly contributed to by that open source movement, that open source logic that allows us to not only deliver, but prepare for what's next. And then if we've done it well, if we have the right team, if we have all the resources, if we are paying attention, what we're seeing with the Nexus 3 platform is there's so much all boats rising with the tide with all the APIs are getting standardized, all the AIs are getting standardized, integrations are getting faster and easier, capabilities are being expanded, isolation in terms of data sovereignty is it's a thing that was not easily attainable 5 years ago. And 10 years ago was completely bespoke. And now we can deliver data sovereignty and jurisdictional sovereignty, because I know you're up in British Columbia. We can deliver these things to literally every organization that prioritizes them. And there's no organization out there that wouldn't prioritize them. So, and that's where I go back with the chaos neutral. I can walk into a room, they didn't even know they could do jurisdictional sovereignty or data sovereignty. And all I have to do is mention it. And then all of a sudden, all the pieces that were organized on the table are disrupted. But we can bring that back together and then deliver that in its new form that is considerably more powerful and more efficient and more forward thinking.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's an amazing place. And I'm looking at the time and going, wow, we have just talked for
All over the radar.
an hour about everything. And I thank you guys because my brain feels so much better. It feels awake, it feels zhuzhed. Um, but I also realize that the listeners are probably like, okay, I've reached my capacity now. My brain's imploding. But we'll talk more about these topics in other podcasts. I just want to thank everybody so much for their time today.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Chad, you
Yeah,
want to say goodbye?
nah. How about aloha? That's
Aloha until we meet again.
yeah. I mean, we were talking about Hawaiian barbecue earlier. Well, look, I, I think there's a lot to find on this topic, and people can certainly do their own research. People can probably hear in our voice how all over the radar we are because we're both experienced and also perpetually understimulated in finding that stimulation in each other and what we can offer. But I I invite everybody to meet some of our Bluefly folks, who many of them are certainly M-shaped, and we've touched on a lot of different aspects of what that means to us individually and together and how it is that we do work. But that's part of the reason why we stand out as a collective is you don't just hire a Drupal developer when you're hiring some of us. You're hiring somebody that has experience all over the radar and can hold a conversation with you no matter what you're throwing at them. Even if it's something that's somewhat unfamiliar, it's still familiar in some regard. So thank you all for listening to the BlueDrop podcast, and we've enjoyed having you with us.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Johan Drolshagen. If you guys want to find him or find out more information on Bluefly, please visit us at bluefly.io. I'm Rose Cameron. So happy to see all of you guys or chat with you today. And be well. We'll see you at the next podcast.